to this talk about a lot of things happening in the world. Of course, I cannot decide if it's supposed to be summer or fall or winter because Thanksgiving is only a few days away, but it is still acting very strange temperatures wise. So who knows what's going on with the environment as well? Because I know over the weekend it was like around 70 degrees here in Durham, North Carolina. And I'm going like, wait a minute. Are we supposed to be in like at least the 50s or the 40s? But hey, that's what's happening in that space. And I've got friends that are also involved in the labor space as well. And I've learned that that's part of Tula's background also. So I'm going to bring Tula up and we're going to have a conversation about a number of important issues going on in the world and how she's been doing as a prime moderator. Every time I turn on that clubhouse, there's Tula doing her thing, either moderating or moderating for other folks as well. So that's always going on, and that is always amazing in that sense. So we've got this thing going on where she is doing her thing and doing it in a great and a powerful way, and all of that. So while I change this backdrop, because that's what happens when you're doing multiple things and all of that, and get to the one that most people are used to when they're watching the show, which is that one, then we'll continue the conversation and all of that. So, Tula, how are you doing today? How are things going in your world? Because, like I said, I love your energy. Every time I turn on the clubhouse, I'm going like, there is that woman with that lovely stage name about being too legit and all of that. And I'm going like, what an amazing person. What an amazing lady. What a truly gifted person. And I'm going like, hey, I need to learn more about this wonderful woman and all that she's been doing in her life. And like I told you before, I went to school at Marquette, and there was a labor organizer there who I think still works with the AFL-CIO, who had a similar name, only I think she spelled hers Tula, and was definitely a labor organizer and in that space. And I know that that's part of your space. And also that even though you're not necessarily from that culture, you are also a big advocate of indigenous rights and Native American rights and things of that nature. So all these are great things that you are very passionate about. So I guess the first question I got to learn about you is tell me who this amazing Tula is and how you even got engaged in all of this wonderful activism work. Were you the activist as a kid? I know that I kind of came into it honestly because my parents were kind of into the civil rights era. They got into media when I was a teenager. So I've definitely come into it honestly and everything. But I do know other people, they get into it because they find a cause, they find something that is they're passionate about, and it drives them into it. Or maybe you were the one that at the age of like 5, you were like, I want to cause some trouble. I don't know how I'm gonna cause trouble, but I want to cause some trouble.
Um, well, thank you for having me. That your words are so sweet. And I actually was an advocate since my youth, and a lot of things really bothered me. Um, like for example, learning about slavery and things like this. Um and actually I was an activist since about apartheid times.
Right.
And I used to in the 80s when I was in junior high school when apartheid was happening, I'd walk into class. I was a little rebellious, and I'd sit down. You know how girls mature a little bit more than earlier than boys,
Right.
right? And so I had my perm and my fuchsia lipstick, and I walk into class, and little boys would be like, "Hi, Tula," and I'd look at their desk. Everyone was eating junk food back then,
Right.
right? Like Mountain Dew, Coca-Cola, whatever on their desk, and Cheetos. And I mean, we ate that too, me and my brothers. But I was an activist because um and I would tell these boys, like, Coca-Cola supports apartheid. And they were like, what's apartheid? So I consider that kind of the start of my activism is way back then. But I've always had a deep care and regard for anybody that was oppressed, you know,
Sounds, it's,
anybody.
yeah, it sounds like it. And it's interesting you bring up the thing about apartheid because I know I've been having a conversation with one of my co-host on the World Edition. It's a news show we do at 10 o'clock. And he's always talking about cancel culture. And he's oftentimes also talking about how he feels the corporations are being forced to take stands that they may not necessarily even believe in. And he's actually thinking that they're almost having to do it to be politically correct and that they are doing it in a not great way. And he's also sometimes puts that blame on Black Lives Matter and some of the groups that I'm actually associated with and things of that nature. But I was wondering, what are your feelings about that? Do you think that the corporations need to be taking these issues, whether it's Black Lives Matter or whether it was Coca-Cola back during the apartheid era and things along those lines? Or do you even understand when people that are maybe coming from the corporate world don't feel that that's even an issue that they need to be addressing as corporations?
Well, I mean, that's a that's a big question. I definitely am all about Black Lives Matter in theory, but we know that sometimes corporations, and I don't know, sometimes people sell out. I'll just say it. Like, sometimes there's monies involved, and we're kind of starting to see some of these things unravel with this um COVID situation, that this push for everyone on earth to get that, it's kind of similar. I've heard a lot of rumblings, like I said, as about Black Lives Matter, and even the George Floyd thing. Some people believe that it was a psyop.
Mm-hmm.
um and so I understand where they're coming from. See, that's the thing about me. I respect all opinions, and I get where people are coming from, because I have humility and compassion, so I get where they're coming from. I don't know. I haven't really investigated that deeply, but I do believe in the cause.
Right.
I do believe that my brothers and sisters, my Black brothers and sisters, should not be telling their boys what to do, with this situation. With When they're confronted by police officers, they shouldn't have that fear.
Right.
And I just personally know people that are very affected by that, that'll get pulled over for no reason, and have their hands up and are crying because they're so afraid that they're going to lose their life right then, and that's not okay. So that part of it, in theory and philosophy, I'm definitely about. um so I hope that answers your question.
No, that does answer the question. What was your thoughts when you served that verdict that came down this weekend with Kyle Rittenhouse? And I know a lot of people are paying attention to Arbor, the network that I'm part of, International Broadcast Media, just did a special on the Rittenhouse verdict, and there was some lawyers, and most of them felt that he should have been acquitted because they didn't see the case law going in a way that would not have acquitted him and things of that nature. But as an activist, did the verdict surprise you, or was it something that you were expecting? And what are your feelings just in general about the way that we treat guns in society?
Yeah, that's one I have mixed feelings on, because I get it, we have our Second Amendment rights here in the States, but also, as an educator for the past several decades, and having worked with the youth, and the fact that we've become so desensitized with school shootings concerns me, because when Columbine happened, I remember exactly where I was, and then Santana happened shortly after. And I did end up for a little while working in the district where Columbine happened, and you better believe they were armored up with mental health services for their their kids after all those lawsuits. And I was naive, when I was younger, maybe not naive, but I very idealistic, and I expected that to transfer across the country. And it hasn't. It really truly hasn't, in terms of mental health services. So in that regard, it concerns me. I do believe if people have guns, they really need to have them locked up if there's children around,
Right.
and teach children about the dangers and safety. I mean, one of my dear friend's cousins was murdered by their older sibling on accident, by gun. That was on the news about 7 months ago. And these things can happen if children. I just think with children, it really needs to, and there should be. I mean, I believe there is law that they should be locked up, and in a safe away from the children, because that's my concern. And then kids getting so upset about bullying, a whole other phenomenon that concerns me. Um, you know, I'm not like big on hunting or anything like that, but I know a lot of people that are. Um, you know, but yeah, so for that particular situation, I have mixed feelings about it as well. Because that was a child, I mean, all the research says, after working with the youth and mental health for all these years, that, the human brain is not done being developed until you're between 22 and 27 years old.
Yeah.
And so when you're thinking of a 17-year-old, and when you look at a 17-year-old when you're more mature, like us, they look like a baby.
Mhm.
And so I don't know that it was necessarily appropriate for him to be let off completely at all, for murder, but or self-defense, whatever, the verdict was. But at the same time, it was allegedly self-defense. So that's kind of my stance on it, is like,
Mhm.
I don't, but who am I? I'm not the judge.
No, yeah, the judges have very difficult jobs and things of that nature. But I'm just
Yeah.
loving to hear people get some of your thoughts and everything. You mentioned education, and my parents, my mother actually was a guidance counselor when I was a baby and a youth and all of that. She then went into the philanthropy world, and my grandmother was a librarian. And I also have an aunt who was a teacher and a principal before she passed away of MS. And then I've got another aunt who is a retired teacher, still I think may occasionally dabble in it, and an aunt who is retired from the Duke Library system and being involved in that. I believe it was the medical library, from what I remember. Of course,
Mhm.
granddad was also very much involved in education, being a biologist and having also had the building at North Carolina Central being named after him. So definitely education has been an important part of my legacy. So I was just wondering, at what point did education become important to you? Because like some of what you were talking about that you did as a youth wasn't just activism. It also sounds like you were trying to educate some of these kids as a youth. So it seems to me like you might have had that teacher gene, for lack of a better term, at a very young age. So at what time did you really feel that education was going to resonate in your life?
Well, that's a good question. And it's interesting because it led me into my career, because there was this awesome counselor who I'm still extremely close with. And me and my dad went to his 80th birthday a while ago. And I was having a hard time being first generation. Once I started to develop and stuff, my parents got real strict on me. And prior to that, in the 80s, I was just running around the neighborhood. So I didn't understand what was happening, the double standard of a lot of first generation children. I didn't understand. But this man did. His family was from Mexico, and he saw a lot of his siblings, the girls, be treated differently. He broke it down to me, just really honest. I just, I was a little rebellious around the age 12. And he really just helped me come up with a plan to leave school, and broke it down, to like be able to do what I wanted to do when I left home, which I've done. And his name was Gil Carbajal. He was awesome, Dr. Carbajal. Nobody called him that. We all called him Gil in the school. He used to call up my dad and be like, "Hey, I'm going to take too little lunch today at the mall. Is that okay?" I mean, times were different then.
Right.
And he just lifted me up. And I loved the way that he got along with everybody. I mean, and at that time, it was like the 80s. You had your, people that loved heavy metal, to the ball players, to whatever. He just treated everyone with such respect. And I was like, I want to give back in that way. And then they started just seeing that everyone would talk to me about their problems. And so I was in like peer counseling. I was in a program that taught foreign languages to, the elementary schools. I was in a project called Project Friend, where we, befriended at risk youth. And that was all before even graduating high school, and it was such an honor. But they knew that that I loved children and stuff like that. I was raising my brothers too, because my parents were always working in the family business. And so that's what I just knew. When I knew Gil, I was like, this is what I want to do. And so that's pretty much what I've been doing for the past 21 years. It was kind of funny when I was in undergrad school, which was psychology and sociology, which I clearly love both because I'm in my activism, right? So I've been an activist, for a long time. Um, and I realized, it was funny, in my last semester of college, I thought I could just get out and be a school counselor. And my amazing um, career counselor or whatever in college. She was so wonderful. She's like, no, you have to go get a master's degree to work in the school at that capacity. I was like, oh, great. So I took a couple years off, came out here to Cali, um, and yeah. And then, but I've been doing it pretty much, about 21 years in total.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been doing great in it and all of that. What are your thoughts when you hear about all this stuff that's going on with our youth? Because I know I've got friends. I don't have any kids of my own, but I do have two nephews that are 12 and 13. I'll actually see them in a few days on Thanksgiving and everything. But they actually live here in Durham where I'm at. But a lot of times they're busy with sports, and my brother's busy, so we don't see each other probably as much as we should. But I was just wondering your thoughts around youth in general, because a lot of times when I'm hearing about our youth, not just the minority youth, but youth across the board, thinking about taking their own lives or doing things of that nature because of all the stress of what's going on in the world, whether it's the pandemic or whether it's other things that they're hearing from society. I mean, I had a environmentalist on recently, and he gave some very startling facts about the environment and this nature of the environment and what we're doing to the environment. And I even told him in the middle of the interview, I was like, if you're right, then my nephews won't make it to 25 or 30, because he was actually thinking that the world might not make it that long if we don't do some better things with the environment. So I'm hoping he's wrong, but just when you hear these kind of conversations, and particularly the impact that they might be having on our youth, and you have kids of your own, what are some of the ways that you are able to even raise your kids, and are they having some of those thoughts as well?
Well, I do believe, especially with COVID, there were kids that were honor roll students in band, several, sports or whatever, that were really struggling, like not to get out of bed. That social interaction was really difficult for them. And then there are other kids that were thriving in that environment, just depending on the kid. But suicide is definitely a huge issue, especially with the GLBTQIA youth. Um, and, it's, yeah, I just really believe that the mental health services, and this is why I became a union rep, because I was at a site that was very impacted. Um, you know, it just had a lot of issues in the community. And I was really surprised that I was only there 2 days a week. And it was definitely a full time gig and could have used more assistance. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to become a union rep and change this, because I was piping up about it all year long, that here I am, a very seasoned professional, and I'm working 14-hour days as if I was new learning the job, but it was just because of the caseload. And I continued to just report data about, the entire community being Section 8 housing, or 100% free and reduced lunch, and then nothing was done about it. And the union rep was listening to me, write this all year long. She's absolutely wonderful, the leader of our group of people. And she was like, you need to step up and be a union rep, because I had the courage to just say, this isn't, I don't, and I was very professional and respectful about it, but nothing was, not even a response was done at that point. And that administrator left, but it really inspired me. That's what I've been working on over the past several years as a union rep, and we are barely getting more time. So there's progress, but gosh, I wish I wish I could do so much more as a union rep. So I think that's the answer, is there needs to be beefing up of mental health services in the school systems. Um, I took an approach, I'm very proactive, and I was, I've been, except for the time got cut so short, we're still working on beefing that up, like I said. But I used to be very well known everywhere I worked for my bullying prevention programs. And because I would teach the children what, at all levels, K through 12. I've mostly worked in secondary at the middle school level, which most people are like, God bless you. But I'm like, I love them. They're so fun. I mean, the secret to middle school is just having a sense of humor, period. You can't take it serious. If they're in a good mood, they're so excited to see you one day, and the next day they're like, Miss Tula, whatever. You know, like I love that age very much. And but so I would, you know, so for the younger kids, I would talk about a bully, the victim, the bystander. But for the older kids, I would refer to it as the legal language, you
Mm,
know, the aggressor, the
mm,
victim, the bystander, and would explain to them how in the real world bullying is harassment. I mean,
right.
period, you know, and this is the consequence if you do this. So when you do this, you're not snitching. You're
Mhm,
actually trying to get your community member help because it's not right or normal or okay to be a bully, period. And so you know, I miss doing those because it really kind of let me connect with the entire school body. But again, the time got chopped. And so I'm just like a firsthand example of someone that saw the success with that. I saw that kids would stand up, you know, as a bystander, you can escalate or de escalate a situation. You know,
mhm,
I would teach these things to the children. Why are people bullying? Well, the truth is, every single bully was bullied themselves, and all the research says that. So it's kind of their way of being like enough is enough, and that's what we've seen with, you know, the shootings and stuff like that, is
yeah.
that these kids get fed up and they go back with a vengeance, and you know, and then these tragedies happen. So
No, no doubt about that. And as you were talking, you were bringing up so many thoughts and ideas about conversation. And one of them was the unions, because definitely I've got friends that are in our local unions. UE Local 150 did a lot of work around the Fight for 15. Of course, that was the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union. And then I've had other friends that were with different unions, including some of our city worker unions and things of that nature. And sometimes when you talk to people about unions, they think of them as being a thing of the past. Like they're not needed as much now. I would argue that they're probably as needed, if not more needed. But I was just wondering your thoughts, because a lot of times when we hear about them, we hear about them when they're on those big strikes. Like I know that the John Deere folks went on a strike recently, and that was a big strike that happened. And of course, we oftentimes hear when the athletes and their unions will go on strike, and of course they're talking millions, if not billions of dollars. So sometimes the common man is going like, I don't know how this is even impacting me, when it's like billionaires versus billionaires, but actually it's more like millionaires versus billionaires, I guess, would be in that case. But I was just wondering, how important do you think unions are in this modern era, this 21st century?
well, I still believe they're really important. I mean, I've done some of the research and I do remember reading that, like, you know, Greek man
Mhm.
was responsible for the unions for the mining. And some of the atrocities that were happening to workers back then. You know, I think unions are great. Um, and generally, you know, advocate for the rights of the bargaining contract members.
Yeah.
So it's great. Um, and it's also like very strict
Mhm.
because basically you can't file a grievance unless there's been a violation of the
Yeah.
contract, you know. So sometimes people come to us for something that's not a violation.
Mhm.
You know, to me, you know, I'm the association rep, and then I have other people that work with me. Although at the present time I'm on a leave
Mhm.
um, of absence, and so and that was just recent. But anyways, so and by choice, and you know, I just utilize some of my rights that I have there as a union rep and as a union member. And so I think it's really important. I think people have a negative connotation as
Mhm.
well, especially in the school system. You know, there's movies like Waiting for Superman, if
Right.
you've seen that movie, right? And that is a fabulous story. It's like Jaime Escalante, Stand and Deliver. It's like a wonderful story of someone going into a very impacted, you know, community, a low SES community, and just changing things around for those kids and giving them hope. And I remember when I watched that movie, I was in tears. But then I was like, oh no, everyone's going to think that public school teachers are just sitting in class, you know, sleeping on their cell phones, like some of those people were in that movie that the children got footage of with their cell phones, right? And I was like, oh no. And you know, and it did start to happen where people were thinking that that is how the school systems are. And I can say firsthand experience, all my years, that is not the way most educators are. You know,
Mhm.
there's always, just like any crew, any team, any job, maybe there's somebody that doesn't carry their weight as much as others, but gosh, teachers are so dedicated. They take their work home. They're grading those papers, they're doing their lessons plans, they're inundated with these ridiculous government standards.
Mhm.
I mean, on it's so sadly, teachers aren't able to teach as much as I think they went into the field for. So the average burnout of teachers is 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And I think if people understood that, because I mean, some of these things are just overwhelming and they don't exactly have the support. So these mentorship programs are crucial for, and I believe they're mandated, if I'm not mistaken, induction programs, so that a new educator, no matter what your position is, is connected with you to kind of answer your questions along the way. I
Mhm.
think that that's a really crucial way to alleviate that burnout. But it is true, it's most teachers leave the profession in their first 5 years, which is sad. It's difficult to retain them because there's just so, I mean, they have so much on their plate. And if they don't have the right support, they leave. And
Yeah.
so I think it's important, but I do think there's a negative connotation with unions sometimes. And I get it, even when, I'm trying to recruit people to help stand up for our rights. But then when there's something going on with them, is when they realize the value of the union. So, because we can come in and speak to the administrator as an administrator, and have kind of different sort of rights to be able to negotiate things with them when someone's rights are violated. Um, and the hope is that most administrators are logical, and they
Mhm.
don't want to see it go up to a step 2 or step 3, or with sitting there with a lawyer or to court,
Right.
right? Some of them will take it that far for sometimes things that seem pretty ridiculous, to be honest. But most of the time, that's not the case. And so, just like, I believe many administrators are good hearted, and that's why they've taken those leadership positions. Oh, goodness. Um, excuse me. But I think that, sometimes people just can misuse their power in every field. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that. So I believe in them.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, that makes
I've been a
sense.
little disappointed with recently the way that my state and my local chapter handled the COVID mandates that are out here. Um,
Yeah,
so
because those COVID mandates seem to be very interesting. I know a lot of people were upset about them. I know even here at Duke University, I think they required that everybody at Duke have the vaccine no matter what. I want to say that they were even threatening that they would not have their jobs. And I haven't checked with my friends to see if any of them lost their jobs because of that. But definitely that has been an issue around North Carolina and other states. But I was just wondering, is that part of what you were talking about when you were saying you were disappointed? Because actually, California is usually seen as a very liberal state. At least that's the reputation that it has and everything. But in some ways, it might not have been as liberal with some of the vaccine mandates. But I was just wondering your thoughts about that and if that's what you were alluding to.
yeah, so and honestly, I got a religious exemption
Mhm.
because I was raised, like I mentioned, very strict
Right.
Orthodox, Greek Orthodox Christian. And so I literally, members of my family have built churches in, the villages in Greece and all over the world. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's a church in my hometown named after my father's saint's name, which coincidentally is the same name as my full name. So
Mhm.
I was able to, just honestly and authentically write a nice letter to get my exemption. So that's not why I'm on leave. It's
Mhm.
completely unrelated and personal,
Right.
um, just with some, uh, other things that I'm dealing with, right?
Right.
So, but yeah, I think that mandating anything on anybody is, I really do believe it's a violation of not only, our Constitution, Amendment 8, freedom to choose, Amendment 4, coercion, illegal search and seizures of our bodily fluids.
Mhm.
Um, Amendment 1 is being violated significantly right now with the censorship. Uh, so, these mandates, I personally believe they're insane.
Mhm.
And there's many doctors and lawyers and scientists fighting this behind the scenes, but it's being censored by mainstream media. And there's not enough research for this particular vaccine. There just isn't. Um, some of the studies they're using, actually, I was playing a summit today,
Mhm.
live streaming it, and they're, some like the study they're using to authorize it for children, for example, ages 5 to 11, there was like 70, I'm trying to think. It was one study maybe of 700. I don't want to misquote that, but it's these are not longitudinal studies. We don't know what the long-term effects are, especially for children. And all of these doctors, that have actually created the mRNA technology, like Dr. Robert Malone and Geert Vanden Bosch, um, have been slandered, deemed as misinformation, as spreading misinformation when that's just not the case. And the truth will be coming out soon. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just put out a book called
Mhm.
The Real Anthony Fauci that is #1 on Amazon's bestseller list.
Yeah.
And it's being completely blacked out by the media. And this is just an example, like the Southwest, cancellations that happened
Mhm.
last month. There were 2,000 flights that canceled. I think the same thing happened on Delta and American. But for Southwest, I'm just using this as an example. The mainstream media came out and said, hey, that's not true. The union isn't walking out. They just happen to
Mhm.
be canceled, those 2,000 flights. But if you go to the SWAPA
Mhm.
website, the Southwest Association of Pilots, I don't know what the other A stands for, the lawsuit is right there in black and white. And there's many of these lawsuits happening that I just feel as though, that's criminal as well, because, you know, journalism is our fourth branch of government, and it's supposed to be um it's supposed to be very well rounded with
It's
all
supposed
different sorts of perspectives.
It's supposed to be, but one of the things, truly, that we've been learning, because actually, when we did a special earlier on the Rittenhouse case, and actually the founder of this network, well, actually both founders were there. There might be some other founders, but at least the two primary founders were on there. And one of them, Nick Palveda, has posted a poll on LinkedIn, and it was a poll just about the verdict. And, that poll, as I later learned in the show and everything, was basically banned. I mean, the folks actually came in favor of Rittenhouse being acquitted. I think it was something like 82 to 18, or maybe it was 84 to 16. But then after the poll was released, and it was not on Facebook, similar things have happened on Facebook. We've definitely seen some things around music on Facebook and definitely on YouTube. But I think we were surprised that LinkedIn, which is supposed to be a more liberal source, decided to take folks down of a poll. And I do know that we even do a show called Media Monday. So it is oftentimes a conversation about how free is the free press, and that's even what you seem to be alluding to. So it doesn't just seem to be our regular mainstream press, but even some of the uh, corporate press as well, because that's what I think you would consider Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and some of those others.
Well, and yeah, I do consider that press, and I'm
Mhm.
really saddened that people's accounts are being removed
Mhm.
for just stating their thoughts on
Right.
this. I mean, it's not okay, in my opinion. And what's interesting is about this, Mark, is when I went, I love my team, right? So even though I'm on leave, I promised them I was going to wrap up the last 4 cases I was working on, get my stuff in the system. So I went to pick up my files last week from my office. It was late night. I got to, say hi to all the custodial crew that was there. And I really wasn't in the mood to talk to anybody, honestly. I just wanted to go get my stuff and, wrap up my duties. And there was a bookmark I've had for like a decade that I got from a wonderful librarian. She was in another inner city school here in Southern California that I was working at. And I was actually really surprised back then to see these bookmarks that she had for free at the desk, but I took one. And what it said was, stand up for your rights, read a banned book today,
Mhm.
protect your First Amendment rights,
Right.
right? So yeah, and that was kind of powerful. And instead of grabbing it, because if I did, I could have showed it to you right now, but I just stuck it to my little whiteboard in my office, for
Mhm.
when I return. I'm like, oh, I love this bookmark, especially with everything going on right now and
Right.
people not being able to have free speech. That is our First Amendment right. And so, you know with that being said, I think Robert Kennedy Jr. does such an excellent job in this book highlighting what's happening, and especially related to this COVID situation. And it's with the thing is that he had an interview with Dr. Mercola,
Mhm.
who put a book out last year, that's called it's still out there, called The Truth About COVID. And they did an interview just a couple days that I aired and streamed out
Mhm.
to you know followers and stuff.
Yeah.
And it stated in there, when he was interviewing Robert Kennedy about the book, he said, this book is like indictment material.
Right.
And it really is, because there's evidence. All of the doctors and scientists that he shouts out in there are the very same ones that when you put them in Google search engines, it says that they're not credible and that they have misinformation. Their licenses have been revoked, So I really encourage people to take a look at the Global COVID
Mhm.
Summit.org that was held in Florida on November 11th. Today, I live streamed the Texas Summit that was held by the Texas Association of Physicians and Surgeons.
Right.
And all of these doctors are fighting these mandates. And what it's looking like is that these basically, it's looking like Fauci and Gates are just suppressing a lot of this information. And um and so that's why there's so much of a ruckus, of a fight. There's marches that have happened all over the world. I mean, if you look at my IG,
Mhm.
I posted a video of this, of worldwide marches that are not being aired.
Mhm.
Um, and I just, it's concerning to me, because, that, why? What's the problem with sharing the other side? Generally, when we see things going on, we see multiple scientists,
Right.
multiple, there's not just Fauci's face everywhere.
Right.
So honestly, um, the book is very informative on the censorship that's happening right now. And, um, people, I think it's alarming to some
Mhm.
people, or some people don't want to believe that this is happening. We've been blessed, Mark, you and I, to grow up in a free society. But you know what? World War II wasn't that long ago. My
Right.
great grandfather was taken from the villages of
Mhm.
Greece. Now, remember, we're Christian.
Right.
The agenda then was to eradicate all brown eyed people.
Mhm.
That's why he was taken. And so I know whatever agendas that people are thinking, or this or that. I don't understand why anyone thinks it makes any sense to have every single person on earth vaccinated.
Yeah.
Um, but I also have that compassion and humility I was telling you about, because I spent my summers in the villages of Greece.
Mhm.
And these villages, nothing here in the States exists like where my parents came from.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, and that is where my humility comes from. I feel so blessed that I was able to have those experiences. And I'll just be honest with you, when I was in Jamaica, it reminded me so much of Greece, with the hills and the goats and the outhouses that I knew how to use. And so, with all that being said, I just feel like, um, people need to really do their research. And I think it's unfortunate, because I love journalism. I
Mhm.
love reading. I love honest journalism. And
Mhm.
I'm really saddened right now, because I really believe that a lot of people think this is the best thing to do, is vaccinate everybody on earth because of this, evil boogeyman virus. And, a lot of successes that these doctors mention are being completely blackballed from the mainstream media. Um, and so I really encourage people to check out those resources, to, check out the Robert F. Kennedy book. Um, Listen to what these are Nobel laureates that are being called spreading misinformation, discredited, et cetera, et cetera. If you put their names in Google search. But if you actually look at their resumes and what they've done in creating this particular vaccine, like I'm talking Dr. Robert E. Malone, and I'm talking Geert Vanden Bosch. Geert
Right.
Vanden Bosch created this vaccine, and yet if you go to his website, there's a letter to the World Health Organization pleading, for humanity.
Oh, wow.
Um, and they are also a part of 10,000 doctors, lawyers, and scientists that launched a lawsuit in May of this year that nobody knows about, but it's a fact. And then here we are with these mandates coming out at warp speed.
Yeah.
Because we know that court cases take time.
Hmm.
It's, you file for a hearing. It might be 2 months out, or it might be emergency. Like we're seeing with some of these movements, like OSHA putting a stop to employers.
Right.
Disney World yesterday, said no to vaccines. I mean, slowly we're seeing people stand up against this because it just, honestly, it just doesn't make sense. Even if you're not the scientist with all the background, that a lot of these people that I'm bigging up right here,
Right.
they have. I just think it's important. I'm a truth seeker, and I
Hmm.
think it's really important for the people to know really what's going on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no doubt about that. Are you surprised that more of our youth don't know about? Because I grew up learning about certain things like the Black Panthers and even their connection to the development of what some people might consider the welfare or the food stamp program and things of that nature with their free lunch programs when they had those in the 60s, and COINTELPRO on the other side, where a lot of our activists were being terrorized by J. Edgar Hoover and things of that nature. And some folks would argue that that terrorism wasn't that long ago, because some people would even argue as to Ron Brown's mysterious death and things of that nature under the Clinton administration, and some other things that have happened under Trump and different other administrations as well. But are you surprised that our youth don't know as much of their past history and some of these historical things that have happened, or is this something that you feel is a weakness in our school system?
I had made an Instagram post a while back about something along the lines of, and it had a whole bunch of KKK guys, and maybe with torches or something. It's like, or I think it was a burning cross with a whole bunch
Right.
of people in hoods. And I was like, it's sad if you're ashamed to share your history, something along those lines, right? It was just a little meme. And what was interesting is, like, shortly after that, um, my son had come home from school. See, I'm homeschooling my kids right
Mhm.
now because
Right.
of this whole situation. Um, but my son had come home from school, and um, he had said that he was learning about, basically slavery.
Mhm.
And I also was following the story in Texas of the couple. I don't know if you remember this story, the principal that had just posted a loving
Right.
picture with he was a Black principal, and he
Right.
posted a loving picture of his white wife.
Mhm.
And the town where he was working just went crazy on him, and then he was put on leave. And that was in Texas.
Right.
Um, so I guess my point, in answering your question, like, do I think that the youth know? You know, I don't know. Because
Right.
to be honest, in the works that I do, I
Mhm.
don't know that they know. I haven't really, now I will be.
Right.
Now that I'm doing this homeschooling and I'm doing it in a, legitimate program, and have a coach, and ordered my curriculum on Friday. And I'm really excited because I love my kids, and really that's what my leave was more about, us pulling back and taking some time together. And so I can't say I'm a curriculum expert, you
Mhm.
know, because when I'm talking with the kids, it's more about them accessing the curriculum, in terms of the basics, in terms of m- any deficits in math, any of those core subjects, how can we make your behavior be good to stay in class, and how can you access those curriculum, those core subjects? And I feel like some of what you're talking about is more in social studies and the other classes that um, maybe isn't, I'm not talking to the students about that. So honestly, I don't know, but that made me hopeful when my son came home, talking about Harriet Tubman. I thought that was pretty cool. um
It's interesting you bring that up because that same gentleman I was talking about earlier, he was talking about. I mean, he's one of my co-hosts and everything, but he was talking about how he sometimes feels that, and I've heard this from other people as well, that we are getting the white students to feel ashamed of their history and things of that nature by teaching quote unquote critical race theory. And I don't know any school that's necessarily doing that. They might be doing some other things that I don't approve of. But he does make this argument that he feels that we are trying to get the white students to be ashamed of themselves by maybe including some of the other things. Because to me, critical race theory is about trying to get folks to understand the entirety of history, not just one
right.
part of the history, but the entirety of history, and for it not to be a highlight reel in terms of certain histories, be that the Native American history or be that the kind of Hispanic history and some of the other histories that are out there as well. So I was just wondering your thoughts about that and how you feel about that as well, because I do hear some people saying these different things where they feel that that is a case as well, where they would like to um, not feel like they're being pressured to learn certain parts of history.
Right. Well, and I just, the way I look at it as is like history is history.
Right.
you know I mean, we can't just erase things that happened. And there are things that happened, and there, in my humble opinion, with the works I do, I think reparations are a must, not only for our natives and honoring their treaties that were signed in 1865, but also honoring the reparations that were promised, from slavery as well, because that hasn't occurred yet. And so these promises that these people made really should be kept. You know, I follow very closely, like, the pipeline issues, and with our native people, trying to put like oil lines like through their burial grounds, and I just find it to be so disrespectful to their culture. And they've been trying to protect the water and earth for all of us. And that's when you speak to the natives, that's what they say. They're trying to protect the land for everybody,
Right.
you know. And so I just think, why are we doing that when there's why are we using fossil fuels when there's, solar power and other ways to make energy? And there's places, and Texas, here in California, we have what the kids and I call Windmill City up out by Joshua Tree. Every time we drive out, just, dozens and dozens of windmills out there creating energy. The whole country, I remember seeing a study on this, that, the whole country could be powered by a small area in Texas, just,
Right.
in these wind tunnels, creating energy. So it doesn't make sense to me when there's so much pollution. There was just an oil spill recently here in Huntington Beach. And, it's, I always think of the Alaska. Remember the Alaska one back in the day? The huge oil spill that happened out there, the Exxon oil spill. Um, and seeing all those animals just covered in goop, is
Right.
just, I don't understand the point. Like, I don't understand. Well, I do, because I think it's driven by profit and money,
Hmm.
which, is problematic.
No,
So,
totally.
you know, um, so anyways, but that's what I kind of have to say about that. And so I think that when I personally, in my education, which was a long time ago, it was a long time ago, I was in high school, but I feel like I didn't learn things that I then later learned in my sociology classes about, like celebrating Columbus Day for so long, for example, and not really thinking about the fact of what the natives went through for that. So
Right.
I think it's respectful that a lot of states and um, areas have honored that day instead of Columbus Day as Indigenous People Day. Um, things like that I think are important. Um, but those reparations are a must, you know.
Yeah, and I was just actually talking to a young lady from Asheville. She actually just recently moved to Durham, but she was glad that Asheville was one of those places that did pass a reparations bill. Asheville, North Carolina, did pass one of those, one of the few in the area. You were talking earlier about bullying. I know that bullying is something that even happens on Clubhouse as well, and I love your energy and I love the way that you handle rooms when you moderate Clubhouse, and definitely when you're on the Success Airlines or some of the other spaces. You're one of the most, and I mean this as a compliment. You're one of the most diplomatic moderators that I run across because, like you said, you do have a habit of trying to hear everybody's opinion, even if they might be opinions that you don't necessarily agree with. So I think that that is a trait that is wonderful of yours. So, one, what is your thoughts about Clubhouse and social media, and even its use as an activism tool, and also your own moderating style? Because I do know there have been entire conversations, and there have been incidences where people have even been bullied on Clubhouse and even banned or kicked off of rooms and things of that nature. But it definitely seems like you have a very diplomatic style, and I really admire it whenever I've seen you in the rooms, and I really love your spirit. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about Clubhouse and how you are able to moderate those rooms, whether you're doing it on a room of your own or whether you're doing it in something like Kayante's Success Airlines.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I I have a club that I've never even used. I've used it one time.
Mm.
And I opened it just to see how to do some things. And then I was like, oh, this is so easy. So I kept asking Clubhouse to delete it. And every time I do, they're like, are you sure? And so they've never deleted that. And my club is there, but I've actually just been rocking out with other people. And thank you, again for the compliments. I appreciate that. It reminds me when I was just growing up and arguing with my mom, and I would try to tell her something. She's like, Tula, I am not diplomatic like you, okay? So I appreciate you saying that. I love you, mom. But anyways, uh yeah, there's bullying on there and it's lame. And you know what I call it? I call it Tanya Harding stuff
Oh,
because
wow.
I'm not gonna lie, I there was a point of time where I was rocking out somewhere and really helping them build their club. And these, people came in and they happened to be female. And I don't think they understood really my relationship in helping build the club. And so
Mm.
they kept pushing me, down to the audience or like blocking me out of rooms. And the first times it happened, my dear friend who ran the club kind of put me up top and was like, no, like this is, and I think after time, the people got to understanding that they knew who it was, and that there was respect for me like a sister, you know what I mean? But still, it was kind of lame and disheartening and, just goofy. And so when I came back, and even if stuff like that has ever happened in any of the other rooms that I'm currently devoted to, like Cayente's room on Success Airlines, because we are having these really conscious conversations every day. And it drives me to kind of follow what's going on with this because, again, it's coming out at warp speed. There was a time where somebody got blocked by somebody, I guess. And you know what? I said to the team, I literally said, this is Tanya Harding crap. And, you know, this isn't how we do it. And to be honest, if you look at my bio and if you see my resume of what the other works I do in the music industry, I work some big events. When the Marleys are there, like whatever. I mean, if you go and push somebody off a stage, what is going to happen in real life? You're going to get escorted away by the bouncer, period. That's it.
Right.
So, I think that sometimes when people are hiding behind a screen, and a cyberbullying is huge for kids too. I mean, we have had consequences for kids because of things they put on Snapchat, thinking it would disappear or whatever. And then thankfully, witnesses stood up or whatever. So sometimes I think there's something behind people hiding behind a screen, and
Yeah.
the same principle applies to the kids. It's like, there's adults that have never gotten the help they need for whatever it is, and they feed really bad vibes. And I just choose not to do that. I've been through a whole lot of stuff, but I'm never going to let it taint me, never going to let it get me down. I just refuse to go to the dark side ever.
No, I
um,
agree.
something in my heart and spirit, so I feel like kindness and respect is important. Although I do have to have my boundaries, especially with some of this controversial
Mhm.
COVID talk. I mean, I have had people come in my back channel and threatening me and this and that. And there's some people I just have to block. I mean, I don't, I got to protect my energy. I'll engage. I love intellectual discourse. And actually, that's how Robert F. Kennedy starts out his book,
Mm.
is talking about how that's important. They want, if people disagree with them, bring the questions and they'll answer them to you with their scientific empirical evidence, right? I like discourse. It's okay to a point as long as it's respectful. And that's really why I'm rocking out with Success Airlines, because they keep it that way. They keep it respectful. That's really, one mic, keep it respectful. You can say whatever you want. You can come in and talk about, unicorns dancing on the ceiling. Great. Moving on to the next person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that that's something that is missing sometimes in our world, where people have to be right and the ego really comes in. And I think that when we're actually listening, it's important. And this is something I say frequently in that space, is that um you know there's a divide and conquer is an
Mhm.
ancient strategy. And
Yep.
right now, the divide is the vaxxed versus the anti-vax. It's not just Biden. There's leaders from all over the world saying the same thing. The
Mm.
unvaccinated are killing the vaccinated. Okay, it's a divide. It just, things like this instantly divide people, and I'm just trying to rise above that and really get people to think that, people aren't just freaking out just to freak out. There is something weird going on, and it's not normal for the entire planet to be vaccinated. That's 8 billion people
Right.
nearly. It kind of doesn't make sense when there's a 98% survival rate, from the actual COVID situation. So with that, yes, there's bullying. Yes, there's bullying in real life. I mean, with some of the works I do, I was, when I started working, I have two platforms listed on my Clubhouse bio. I haven't updated it in a while, but I
Mhm.
manage several platforms. And beyond that, I was just trying to beef those guys up.
Right.
But when I started working with some of these honorable people that I work with, and this is like Bob Marley's friends, right? These
Mhm.
wonderful foundation people, and I told them about a couple of my haters I already had in the in the reggae family. They're like, "Are you ready for more?" And I was like, "Bring it!" For God's work. I don't, I really don't care. Like, I don't. People can try all they want to, like take it down, but I feel like I'm doing Jaw's work, and I don't have a question about that. I'm trying to do the right thing to spread truth and love. So I'm not really concerned. I mean,
No,
if
and
people don't like it,
you definitely
that's
spread
their
truth and
business.
love on a regular basis. That's one of the things I love about you, Tula. And one of the things that I was talking about is just in general. Well, actually, I got a couple of questions. Like I said, it could talk to you for probably decades on hours and everything of that nature. But definitely one of the things that I was thinking about is definitely I am a fan of reggae, fan of Bob Marley, fan of Jimmy Cliff, and I love some of the lyrics of their songs and things of that nature. They were very politically conscious in their music. So at what point did you fall in love with the whole reggae sound, and at what point did you kind of like make that part of the Tula music repertoire in terms of things that you love and things of that nature? Because definitely it is a very politically oriented music. It has always been. I think about things like stand up for it and things of that nature, and there have definitely been some other classics as well. The whole thing about I shot the sheriff, but I did not shoot the deputy is another classic one as
Yeah.
well. But definitely, I was just wondering at what point did reggae become such an important part of your life?
Gosh, you know what? Always. I got my first Bob Marley shirt. I have a wonderful mother figure that was, someone close to our family. And she was from New York. And when I was 13, 14 years old, she brought me out to New York. And she was from upstate. And her sister was living in the city in Manhattan. So we went to a show on Broadway. I went and saw Cats. And then, I went upstate, and then she took me to Woodstock because I really wanted to go to Woodstock. I was kind of an unusual kid, and some of it was because of her, because she was way into classic rock. And, you know, she also worked at my dad's family business since I was two. And, she had a bedroom for me at her house. She's wonderful, Mary Spinelli. I love you. And so when I was young, we went to Woodstock, we went to the store. She's like, you can pick anything you want in here. What do you want? And I picked a Bob Marley tie-dye shirt.
Well,
So I've really been, rocking it for a long, long time, and just the principles of it. I always tried to live that. And I had a dear friend that passed when I was 14, and him and I would always wear our tie-dye Bob Marley shirts. His was a little different design than mine, on the same day, like on Thursdays in junior high school, in that same junior high school where Gil Carbajal was. And he died tragically in he was driving with somebody who was drunk. They were kids, and he got killed in an accident. And suddenly, and there was an award that the school had in his honor for several years that had that quote by gosh, I don't want to say his name right, but the quote is, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. It's Charles Swindle is who it is. And that's just my principle in life, and I just, so I don't know, reggae just means so much to me. It's been my salvation. Music overall has been my salvation throughout my life at difficult times. I think it is for a lot of us. You put on that music, and I just think reggae has such a good vibe with that, the bass, and the lyrics, because they're conscious. The message is in the music. And so yeah, so I mean, I've just kind of not really ever been super into the popular culture stuff. In fact, the name Too Legit was really funny as a kid. And I don't know if I've told you this story. Do I still have time for this little
yes,
story?
yeah, definitely.
Okay, so my when growing up, right? I'm Tula is my name, and on Clubhouse I am Too Legit. And the way that happened is hilarious because one of MC Hammer's producer invited me to the app, right? DJ King Assassin. And another friend of mine took credit, who I love. He lives up in San Francisco, and he's a videographer for events. And that's how Clubhouse used to work. Like, you'd get on, and then someone would be like, oh, Tula's here. And so he took the credit on my profile, but who really invited me to the app, and the reason I have that name on there is because of DJ King Assassin. And he was MC Hammer, Michael Jackson, Tupac, Mariah Carey's producer, right? And so I had seen him posting all these pictures of MC Hammer. So when I signed up for the app, I didn't know what I was signing up for. So I just, had Too Legit on there. Then I followed around MC Hammer, who is on the app a lot.
Okay.
I followed him around, and he gave me the name. He was like, I was like, listen, I'm the real Tula, da da da. But the funny story about it is, in high school, when that song was out, these boys, 3 football players, I was putting my stuff in the locker, and they walked by me doing the Too Legit, thing. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks, boys. I didn't know what they were talking about.
Right.
I got home that night. I told my brother, who was also a baller, and he was like, "True, that's this like really famous song, by this guy MC Hammer." And we sat down and watched MTV until the song came on. So I've just always kind of been into some of the more underground, like, or I love classic rock, I love jazz, blues, all that stuff. I just That's what I've kind of been into, more is underground hip hop, reggae, the roots reggae, those foundation guys I just love. And then and I've just been honored that, to work with some of them, and that some of them have become dear friends of mine, like uncles on my journey. And it's been wonderful. And then yeah, I was just into, you know what I mean? So that's kind of where my reggae started, but a little bit about the whole story.
what was your role in working in the entertainment industry? I knew that you had worked in the entertainment industry, but I wasn't exactly sure what it was that you've done. But I know it's definitely involved a lot in hip hop. I know it's involved probably some of our jazz legends and maybe even some of our blues legends because I'm a blues fan and worked with our local blues festival. By the way, I'm still convinced that Buddy Guy has found the fountain of youth. I want him to pass it on to me because he's 80 years old and he's still running around like he's 14. So I don't know where
Right?
he found that at, but he needs to
I know
deliver it
some of
over
these
here.
some of these guys, they got it, they know the secret,
Yeah.
that, like you said, the fountain of youth. I you know well, I have been working in like basically mostly like promotions, you know is what I've been doing with a lot of the platforms. That's about it. And there's so many moving parts
Right.
to putting on a festival, like to
Right.
the bolts that hold put the stage together. So here locally, and one of my best friends passed away about a year ago, and he was actually very internationally renowned as a DJ, as a reggae DJ, and he was a mentor of mine. And then another one of my best friends like passed away a couple years ago, 2 years ago on Christmas Day. It was horrible. And so those guys brought reggae here to Southern California and were very well linked with a lot of these foundation people. And I feel so blessed that they were my mentors. So a lot of my works that I've done, I know that they would be so proud, and they were so proud. They were like cheerleaders for me. Again, one died of pneumonia and one died of a heart attack. And that's been really sad, to be without them, because we talked all the time, and they were such wonderful mentors. I mean, honestly. And um and I think that people that were slowly, I was really inspired to do ambassadorship like after I went to Jamaica, and I was, kind of toured around there by Marley family, and it was a big honor. It was like a birthday thing, but I'd been wanting to go since I was 13 years old. And I finally got to go a few years ago, and it was just it was an honor to be like protected and, just shown around to the places I wanted to see, Tough Gong Studios, Trench Town. I was there, and it was just really inspiring to me when one artist had posted us up on Facebook. I had requests from like all over the world because my profile's still very private on Facebook. And I just kind of kept them there. I didn't really respond. I had hundreds and hundreds of requests. And then after I came back from Jamaica, I was like, I'm ready. I want to do this ambassadorship because I believe when I went to the Bob Marley Museum in Kingston, Jamaica, um that I was kind of like delivered to, like I was in tears to see all of the things that he did, including like performing after being shot at,
Right.
4 times in his chest. Just seeing it there all in one place, even for someone like me that's been a reggae lover my whole life, was just like, wow, this guy was incredible. He was only 36 years old and he did all this stuff. It just inspired me so much to really get my activism stuff going. And so then I started accepting all those requests and really making like dear friendships along the way. Like I'm a part of the 12 tribes of Israel, that's based out of the Haile Selassie chapter of
Right.
Ethiopia. And that's been an honor to be, a California rep for that. Um, and some of the friendships that have formed out of this are just like amazing. Like the LA, Rasta and reggae community is wonderful. I'm well linked here in the San Diego community as well. And but lately I've been doing kind of more worldwide ambassadorship, and to me that's kind of spreading the message. It's not official, yet, but maybe
Right.
someday it will be. Who knows?
Hopefully it'll be official. We may have an assignment for you to do for an event that I'm going to be part of. That's actually going to be in San Diego. But we're talking about LinkedIn, and there's a big time LinkedIn influencer that has become a friend of mine because he is also an activist in a lot of spaces as well. And that's the gentleman by the name of excuse me, Brian Shulman. But Brian Shulman is a Tourette syndrome survivor when he was a child, and now he's got his thing called Voice Your Vibe. That's the name of his company. But he's going to celebrate 5 years. I think it's 5 years of his business being in business, and we're going to have, because he's got this worldwide network of people that he's connected through LinkedIn. There are people in Oregon, I believe, in other parts of the world like India and everything else. But me and one other person are supposed to be the ones putting that event together in March. We have no idea about San Diego, even though Brian lives there. So I might need a promoter party person to help me out in there since that event's supposed to be happening in 5 months. So it's a quick
Oh, cool.
turnaround. So don't where you might be getting a call because I might need some help in terms of finding a patio or some sort of venue in San Diego because I know that it's going to be taking place during the same weekend as social media marketplace or something like that. It goes on annually, and that's in March as well. So I think it's in the middle to the latter part of March. But yeah, he
Okay.
does. One of the things I found out about LinkedIn that I love. I mean, we talked about Clubhouse, but one of the things I found out about LinkedIn that I love as well is that a lot of people think of it as a business platform, and I agree, it's mostly a business platform. But a lot of people are using it to put out their activism message. Because, like I said, Brian does that. He does two events. I always get the name wrong, but I think it's What's Up Wednesday or something along those lines, and Shout Out Saturday. And they talk about, the things that you might remember as a kid, cereals and things along those lines. But they also talk about real issues. And then there's a couple of folks that do other shows that have come out of there. Like I know Nancy Deborah does a show because she was actually an abused child, I think, by a family member. So she talks about that in very forthright kind of ways and everything, and doesn't hesitate to be transparent about what she went through in her stories and things of that nature. And there's some other people that do some amazing things as well that use it as a platform to talk about their different issues. So one of the things I love about LinkedIn and other social media is that it can be a platform for telling our truth. And I do believe that we need more of those truth
Yeah.
seekers out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never really been on there much, but I probably should. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, I struggle with just little platforms that I have.
No, you
But
do great. Like I said, you do great with Clubhouse. One of the things I was going to ask you really quick, then we'll wind down very shortly, is um, I do know that one of the other things which surprised me, because like I said, you do have that Greek background and that Mediterranean background, but you are also very active in, like I mentioned at the beginning, the Native American culture. And I do have some cousins that are also in that space as well, because some of my family members, definitely, I would say, on the immediate family, we claim more of the African American heritage. We acknowledge the other parts of the heritage, but we have some other family members that only acknowledge that part of that heritage. I don't know that they would even acknowledge that they had any African American or white parts of their heritage at all, but they only honor the Native American side, is what I was trying to say. But I was just saying, but they are great in the powwow competitions and all of that. So they definitely circulate around because I know Verna's husband is from the western southwest because he's of the Apache tribe and things of that nature. But I was just wondering, how did you get involved in the Native American culture, and have you done a lot with the powwows, or is it more about Native American activism?
I think it's a little bit of both. I was blessed to have family friends that were
Mhm.
native that, were just close to, I guess, mostly my mom's side of the family, like living in Denver, and then other peers and stuff that I grew up with, and I was very interested about their culture. And then later, when I moved to the Four Corners area for college, there was, an abundance of natives down there. And so when I moved out here to California, I had really missed seeing natives the way that I saw them and grew up with them in Colorado, you know? And they're definitely here though, because we are on native land, pretty much the whole country. And so um yeah, so there's ask me your question again.
No, I was
So
asking how you got involved with it. So you actually answered the question by talking about those family ties. Um, Coming
it's just
back to that,
respect that
there's
I also always had, Mark. Like it's just growing up in Colorado, even when I did learn about history, I thought that their attire was beautiful. I just thought they were just a beautiful people. And um it's just, I don't know, it's just a respect it's been ingrained in me. And a lot of people think I'm actually native when they see me because I wear moccasins a lot, and a lot of my jewelry is like worldwide, and a lot of people ask me if I'm native, and I always take it as a big compliment. So
what do you think about people? Because I've actually had this conversation with a couple of friends when they think about terms like cultural appropriation, where people feel that maybe either the hip hop or the native cultures. I'm thinking about like what happened with the Redskins, which is now the I think it's the Washington Nationals or something like that. But there was a lot of conversations. I actually went to Marquette, and when I was there, we were the Warriors. I still slip up every once in a while and still call us the Warriors, even though we're now known as the Golden Eagles. But they did have a relationship with one of the Native American tribes, and they would actually do like some traditional dancing. And there was some time that they did more of the stereotypical kind of dancing and stereotypical kind of imagery, but there wasn't at least an attempt in my mind to reach out to one of the Wisconsin native tribes and things of that nature. But not everybody has done that. So when you hear terms like cultural appropriation, do you think it's even a real thing? Because sometimes when I talk to friends of mine, they're like, they don't get it, they don't think that it exists, or is it something that you actually feel does exist in our society?
Well, I think that we had the same thing out here with the San Diego Aztecs,
Right.
and so I think that I- you have to look at the people and see if
Right.
they're offended or not, and I
Right.
think that that needs to be respected. If they are, then let's change something.
Right.
If something is really offensive because of some type of oppression or some type of history, or I know statues are being removed, around the world because of stuff like this, which goes back to our point that we were talking about. Like, do we take away that history, or do we, maybe replace it with something that still, it doesn't erase that history from happening? You know what I mean? I have mixed feelings on that
Yeah.
but I think absolutely you look to the people, you know and see if it's something that is truly offensive to them,
Hmm.
then make some changes. Like, for
Yeah.
example, headpieces. You'll see a lot on social media, you'll see women wearing headdresses and stuff,
Yeah.
but if you actually look into culture, it's not supposed to be generally used like that. And I think that's
Right.
offensive to some people. It's supposed to be for chiefs and people that earn those feathers, on their head. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. And I see gorgeous, gorgeous photos of people with these pieces on, and it's offensive to some people, to some natives, to many natives.
Yeah. Is there any times in your life that you feel that you have to tone down your activism? Because I know that sometimes when I run into new friends, sometimes I can be very adamant about some of the issues that I believe in, but sometimes I can also want to maybe, I won't say suppress, but maybe not let folks know everything that I believe in because you don't necessarily want to get involved in confrontation all the times. Because, they say sometimes that if you get to know new friends and new acquaintances, the things to stay away from are religion, politics, and to some degree sports. But I was just wondering your thoughts about that and whether that's kind of the motto that you live by, or do you just let people know the Tula and how legit you are on a regular basis, or are there
No,
times
I
that you actually tone it down?
Yeah, no, you know what? I really am of the belief that there's a time and a place for things. There's people that are very close to me that we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. We just don't talk about them. I mean, and so, you know, that's just, I don't know. This is just something that's deep in me. The activism part, it's just something I feel like I was born with or born to do, is to stand up for rights. And I've often thought, honestly, that's what's a shame about everything happening now. Because I do think people were taking, their freedoms for granted, and now they're being threatened with these mandates. But I've always thought that, gosh, if I lived in another time, I mean, and then here I am being that piping up person about things that I believe in that, are controversial, but really, the truth is being so masked, and that it the public is being deceived so badly. It just breaks my heart. Like, it's, because these are true facts. It's not quacks or tin hats or conspiracy theories. It actually really does appear to be a conspiracy. And
Yeah.
many of these highly qualified, doctors, lawyers, and scientists have other words for it too, like collusion, these other technical terms. So I'm interested to see what's going to unfold here as this information comes out. because I'm very grateful for, for what Dr. Malone calls pirate radio,
Yeah.
Clubhouse, because there is still free speech there. Thank
Yeah.
goodness,
Yeah.
right?
No, I love the free speech on Clubhouse, and definitely a lot of people talking about different issues and bringing up issues that, like I said, they may agree with or they may not agree with. But I've also thinking about like here in North Carolina, and I think we've seen it on definitely with the vaccine. We've definitely seen it with other issues. But I remember here we had what was called the bathroom bill. It was one of those LGBT kind of rules, and it was about whether um, transgender folks could go into one certain bathroom or another. But there was a whole controversy around that. And there are some people that are of the religious right here as well. Some people might call them evangelists and things of that nature. But definitely within that conversation, I did see some families that were torn apart because of the views that they had around the LGBT community or around that bill. Just like I saw people torn apart by the DACA bill and things of that nature, because one side of the family may feel that too many of the youth that were Latin American were coming across unfairly, and somebody else might be like, no, they've got as much right to be here as anybody else does. So that's one of the things that I do sometimes get concerned about when I hear some of these issues that can be divisive and very divisive and things of that nature. So I just wondering, as a good moderator, how do you deal with that even in the clubhouse space? Because like I said, I've seen you have people that are of different views even when you're talking to them, and I'm just wondering what kind of tactics or techniques would you give to others that are thinking about either going into moderated or thinking about going into activism?
With moderating, I had some wonderful coaches on there. I got DJ Chill, that's Wu Tang family. And that's where I was rocking out, for a long time. And I also was rocking out with Tony Pizarro, who's another one of Tupac's producers. Um, and he was doing a daily show, and I know it's on pause right now because he was
Right.
getting some things in order. And DJ Chill still does his Birdhouse every single day. He tries to uplift indie artists
Mhm.
in there, and it's wonderful because he has all the connects, because his cousin is literally Wu-Tang family, and he's a wonderful, gentle person. His wife is on there, and I learned a lot about moderating from those guys, and then other people that I ended up starting to, branch out and look at more of these spiritual. See, I call Clubhouse church and school if you use it wisely. I don't really go to the negative vibing rooms. I just don't, you know. Sometimes I might go in there thinking it's something, but we try not to talk about other people when they're not in the space. I mean, it's just disrespectful to do in
Right.
real life too, right? And there's just a lot of rules, and sometimes, like for example on Success Airlines, we consider it like this fake flight that we're on
Mhm.
every single day, having conscious conversations that are following this COVID thing. And the flight can get a little turbulent,
Mhm.
right? So when that happens, we have to step up. Sometimes I have to mute people's mics because
Right.
people get so excited they don't understand the rhythm of Clubhouse. You have to go into a room and understand the vibe in that room. Every room is different. There are some rooms I love the content, I love what they're talking about, but every time you go in the room, it is PTR order.
Mhm.
PTR means pull to refresh, and that replaces, everybody's place on the stage. So one at a time, you have to listen. So if there's 500 people in that room, you're waiting like maybe a couple hours to speak, and you have to wait because
Right.
some moderators are so strict that if you unmute and say, well, can I say something? They'll throw you to the audience.
Mhm.
And it's not disrespectful, it's just honoring their rules.
Right.
And so our rules aren't quite that strict. Sometimes when it gets bumpy, we'll put people in a queue and have to, because people aren't respecting the rule
Right.
of one mic and not to disrespect each other, so we'll have to just number people out, 1 to sometimes 26, 30. It just, and people will wait their turn to say what they got to say on the subject, and we try to value everyone's opinion, just move on to the next person. Sometimes it just, I think that it's about keeping order, and every vibe is different. Like DJ Chill's Birdhouse is more casual. He's
Right.
playing these tracks for the artists that are coming in. And then we're trying to uplift these artists and give them a little feedback. And we all make tweet sounds. And, Tony Pizarro's was like a little, he had a regimen. He had his 2-hour show, which I know is coming back soon. And it was, he had certain pieces of it that were
Mhm.
crucial. and most of it was music, and it would be packed. So some rooms you go into have 10 people, and sometimes those are so great because those are those really intimate
Right.
conversations where you get to know somebody. I think the room you came into was a little on that
Right.
smaller,
Right.
sort of size, and it was late night, and it was just that bonding about
Mhm.
where you're at in North Carolina, right?
Right.
And, it was so it's just reading the vibe of a room, I believe, and then building those. I feel like a lot of these relationships that I've built with people where I am, modded in the rooms, they're like authentic relationships, just like real life. I think that Clubhouse mirrors real life. So there's high vibrations and there's low vibrations, and whatever, to each his own, right? Like, I'm not here to judge. That's for the Most High to do. But my choice has been to kind of stick with the higher vibrational things, and whether that's spiritual or educational, or that's kind of where I try to hang out.
No, I agree, and that's generally where I hang out as well. I love the. I've actually become a recent member now. I think now for almost 2 months. Maybe it's been a little bit longer, but did an interview actually with somebody that I met that I had already known, but we didn't realize that we had known each other for as long as we did. But IPC, I've actually known for a while, and he's the founder of Funky Eye Puppets. But I didn't realize that he had come to perform at the Hayti Heritage Center, which is a cultural arts center here in Durham, because he's a haiku champion. So he actually knew Desan, the coach of the team, as well as the man that puts on the slam poetry. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I know who you are," and everything. And then at some point, I invited him to be on the show. He's invited me to a couple of different things, and then the thing I know, he's like, "Hey, I like your voice. I think I want to make you a puppet." I'm like, "Okay, I'll be a puppet." So now I get to play the voice
You
of that.
gotta text
You
me a
ever
picture of this puppet.
you ever see me dancing around in the clubhouse and I've got like that little monkey suit? That means that I probably just left the Funky Eye Puppets and everything of that nature. Because usually I've got on one of my more professional profiles, but I do pop in as Echo as well in some of the clubhouse spaces because he's got different folks, and that's actually an interesting club because it's all about creating this thing called the Matsu, which is music and art together supporting unity. So he's using that as kind of a space to talk about issues and things of that nature. And he's even got some of the actors that have got different disabilities. I know there's one that's got MS. I think there's a couple that were gunshot victims, and there were a couple of other folks that have got different kinds of ailments. Yeah, Troy is blind, and I think he's out in California. Cello Phoenix is his clubhouse name, and
Oh, I
things of that
love.
nature.
There's like a whole blind musician group on there. I mean, I've made some dear friends out of that group, and it's just so incredible that the technology, allows our blind brothers and sisters to get on there. And you know, yeah, that I think that that is such a cool thing.
Oh, yeah, it's real cool, and I love the
The
different things.
accessibility features,
Yeah,
it's a good
and
thing.
it's bonding people and it's creating new kinds of opportunities for people to do amazing things. That's one of the things I love about Clubhouse. But there are a couple of those rooms, like you said, that you go in there and you kind of wonder about their vibes or their views and everything. And some of them can be fun to pop into. I'm not gonna lie, I've gone into because I am even at my age single, so I've ducked into a couple of the dating ones, and sometimes they can be fun games, and sometimes you're going like, "What the heck have I stepped into?" Depending on which things are going on in those spaces. And I've also stepped into some of the engagement rooms. Now, those are some of those rooms that you can really wait a long time for because they're trying to get you to promote your stuff and promote whether it's maybe your clothing brand or your music or whatever. And I have stepped into some of those, and there might be like anywhere from 600 to maybe 1,000 people in the room. And if you're way down the list, I think one time I was sitting there in the room for maybe a couple of hours because I'm going like, but fortunately I had other work that I could do during the time, but I'm going like,
Yeah.
yeah, they're gonna get to me at some point or another.
Well, and I know that's what's cool about Clubhouse, right? You could just stick your headphones in and still I can clean my house and like do
Right.
everything. And when they call out my name, I'm there to like, represent. And I'm listening. I do think I also suggest for people to listen. Listen. So many people are so excited to just unmute and then when you're a listener, or sometimes I don't accept the invites to come up and I want to hang out in the audience. And like sometimes I can't hear if everybody's talking at once. It makes me leave the room because I
Right.
just can't hear what is going on, and it's too much yelling and this and that. And so to listen and again just get that vibe of the room, I think is really important on there. And yeah, there's theater rooms, there's comedy rooms. I mean, that one girl that was the Clubhouse featured person, she's so funny, like Leah, I forget what her name is, but she was wonderful. I've been to some of her comedy things, just laughing, hysterical. You know what? A lot of the times, most of the rooms I'm in, I'm laughing, like
Oh
behind
yeah.
the screen, just laughing at these guys. And even the people that I've gotten really close to, because I like stuff that's entertaining in a more light sort of way, even when it's these controversial, heavy things we're talking about. So
Oh no, and there's definitely even some laughter in those rooms, and even in the podcast rooms because I've been there with trying to think of her name because it's Flintstone has got it in the title because it's Jamie is her real name, but I know that she's got Flintstone Media out of Florida, but she runs a couple of those podcasts and rooms, and even those can get funny as well. So definitely,
hey man, fun is a basic need. Don't forget it. You
it
know.
is. And that's one of the things I was going to ask you. What are some of the traits that you think are most needed in society now? Because I would agree with you that fun is something that we need. I also think that we all need, and that's one of the things I love about a lot of the clubhouse rooms is education. Because I sometimes think that we get so caught up in diseducation that it's always good to get education and things that you can learn about it. That's where I get frustrated with our school systems because sometimes I think that we've taken out things that we should have, like the arts and like vocational training, and we're not putting in things that we should have, like knowing the basic financial rules and maybe even knowing the Constitution. So that's things that I wish we actually had in our school system that I don't feel we have enough of. But I don't know if you would agree with me on that
You
or.
know, I do to a point because, like, I took home ec. Like, that's where I
Mhm.
learned. Even though my mom is a wonderful seamstress, and many of my aunts were, my grandmother made me an authentic Greek cultural costume.
Mm.
That I have by hand. She sewed the whole thing, and but still, I learned how to sew on a button in home ec class and how to cook and things like this. And why don't we have that anymore? Technology was so fun. Like my technology class where, you learned how to use a saw and all these machines and how to be safe with it with your goggles. And
Mhm.
I think that, there is a pretty high dropout rate.
Mhm.
And I think that the relevance in education is kind of lacking to the real
Mhm.
world, especially now. You were talking about earlier about the kids
Mhm.
being well educated. And I think that there's some things with some of this programming with all these devices concerns me. I mean, the American Academy of Pediatrics only recommends 2 hours per day of screen time.
Mhm.
And before COVID, I was way, way, way below that. I was a very
Right.
strict mama. We were out riding bikes, at sport events, whatever, friends' plays. Like we'd go to their friends, you know what I mean? Things like
Mhm.
this, supporting extracurricular activities of their friends. And COVID sadly, made kids all over the world just be
Mhm.
more reliant on screens. I think that provides a little disconnect. Um,
Mhm.
but yet at the same time, kids do have to be technologically savvy, right, out in the world. And so, I think it's a balance of things. And I think there should be options. I think that, obviously basic academic skills. That's actually one of the elder Rastas calling me right now,
Yeah.
from the Wailing Souls. But anyways, so uh, you know, I think that the relevance is key. To be honest with you, one of the best programs that I worked in Colorado when I was out there for a few years. And then I came
Mhm.
back to California. I just missed the ocean way too much. I'm an islander. I'm a Pisces. I need to be by the water. It just is very calming, right? And so, because I grew up on the island, that's where, my dad's
Mhm.
from an island. That's where I spent my summers growing up, as I mentioned earlier. So, um, one of the best programs that I ever worked in with the youth was more of a discovery sort of program. And
Mhm.
so it's like, okay, kids, here's our unit on math, and I would often be a chaperone going along on these, as the counselor,
Mhm.
social worker. I've worked in I have multiple credentials.
Right.
Um, and so we would, like, okay, let's learn about math. Let's go out to Chicago and study the street systems. You want
Mhm.
to know about marine biology? Let's take a trip out to California. Right. And this was included. The parents would pay partial. We'd always have wonderful deals with these educational programs. I had a snowboard and skateboard club. Of course, I
Oh,
had to have like 10 waivers signed in the school district, right? For sports like that, for skateboarding and snowboarding, where we would take off from school and go up to the mountain. A basin in Colorado, Arapahoe Basin, gave me a deal of $25 for the kids' lift tickets and rentals, and then I would be able to go ride there for free and teach these kids how to snowboard that had never even seen the mountains growing up in Denver.
yeah,
um, Learning about native cultures. You were asking about that, and then going down to the Four Corners area, having dances and ceremonies from the Navajo, going into Kivas, going to their land. To me, that is the most beautiful kind of education, is that type of education, experiential, going out and learning what it is that you're talking about instead of just getting it from a book. And so I'm actually very excited to do that stuff with my kids this year, and and take the year for us and our bonding, and just have a really good time with that. And so I'm going to be traveling around and showing them things. We already have a list of places that we want to go, because field trips, are a part of homeschool, and then there's other ways to unite with other families and stuff. So I've had a lot of friends that have done this for years and years, and so
yeah,
I'm really excited about that. And but I think that's the to be honest, I think that's the just highest form of education. A lot of the kids that would tend to go to this program, however, were kids on the fringes. For whatever reason, we were just about to lose them from the school district, and then the last resort was going to this charter school.
wow,
But they were some of the most brilliant kids that I've ever worked with. I'm still friends with those kids today because they called me Tula. They didn't call me Miss McCarley. There were policies in the school that were just, we called each other by first name.
mhm,
Um, the grades were a little different, all that. But anyways, my point is that to me is the ideal form of education. And honestly, when I moved back to San Diego, I was like, I'll just work in a conventional. I was really sad to leave that school, but
mhm,
excited to come back here to Paradise. And I was like, I'll just work in a conventional school for a couple years, and then I'll, go back to like a charter school. And then do you know what happened, Mark? The
but
charter schools of San Diego broke off into their own school district. And I was like, really? And then I, got pregnant and then I was busy being a mom all these years.
right,
So who knows? Maybe I'll land back in, something like that again. I mean, I still have my job. It's a wonderful career. I have wonderful benefits. I love it. I could get along with anybody, obviously. I can do fine in a conventional space. I can do fine across the table from lawyers in the school system. I mean,
mhm,
I am an advocate for kids with disabilities.
oh, well,
So that's like really where I've landed. Even though I went to school to do my counseling, I've landed more in that arena, which has been an honor to kind of stand up for their rights. So that's a big part of activism and, advocacy that I do. Um,
are you
and
sorry,
Go
are you
ahead.
surprised? Are you surprised that a lot of kids don't, well, not kids, but a lot of parents don't even realize. I'm probably going to go down another rabbit hole, but that's okay. We do that when when me and you get together. That might be a
Yeah.
Pisces and a Cancer thing
I
and
know where you
everything along those lines. It might be a whole water sign thing going on here. But one of the things I was going to bring up that you just brought up this interesting is, and I think I may have mentioned it in at least one or two of the clubhouse rooms, but I have dysgraphia, but I did not discover that I had dysgraphia until I was an adult, and it was actually through goodwill, which means that if we were going somewhere and you told me, Mark, I need you to go left, it might take me a minute to figure out which way was left and which way was right, because it's a whole left right kind of thing, and there's some other parts of it as well, but it wasn't diagnosed till later. And on the flip side of that, I know some kids that were given Ritalin at a very young age and everything because they were considered to be hyper or something like that. Like I mentioned earlier, I've got two nephews. I don't know any kid that isn't hyper. So I don't know
back.
why we put as many kids on Ritalin as we do. So as one in that disability space, and particularly our youth that are disabled, and actually a friend of mine was doing a show about autism not that long ago on a one of these streaming platforms. But I was just wondering, Do you think that we even have enough knowledge about our kids and their disability health or their mental health to even try to make these diagnoses? Because part of the problem that I think exists, and it even comes back to the vaccination and the mandates and everything, is there's this thing, and we've got plenty of them in North Carolina, called biofarms that I think have a um, vested interest in trying to make sure that people are drugged in one way or the other, whether that's the kids being drugged on Ritalin or whether that's the vaccinations and things of that nature. So I was just wondering your thoughts about kids and the maybe over medication of
Oh yeah, I agree, and I've actually, had experiences of friends that have young boys. And I had a friend several years ago that had the teacher basically was trying to say that all of half of the class, all the 10 boys had ADHD. And I was like, no, no, and no, and no. They're just boys, they have energy. Come on now. I was really disappointed in that particular teacher and really helped advise, a couple of those parents, like, um, to just no, to hold it down and just to address the fact that that was inappropriate for an educator to say,
them. Right,
and this was outside of this isn't my job, this is my personal sort of
right.
life, friends. But yeah, no, I see it often. I see, I'm gonna give you an example, and I've used this. Okay, so one time we received a request for an assessment,
Mhm.
for an IEP. And you know what that said? It said assess for 504 slash 401k. He wrote 401k instead of an IEP. Okay. This doctor. And
Mhm.
to me, that prescription form is so telling because that's how busy they are. They see these kids in an office for 10 minutes, the teachers, myself sometimes, and I'm not as honored as some of the other team members to work with these kids on a daily basis, but they see them for just a little smidget of time and then ADHD or whatever it is, you know what I mean? And I think it's absolutely related to some broken parts of our healthcare system is
Mhm.
just this instant fix of the Western sort of medicine of like, okay, here you go, take this, get better, instead of figuring out why the woman might have anxiety, for her PTSD, for the domestic violence, for, do you know what I mean? Like, let's get down to the
Oh no.
nuggets of what it
And
is.
and Tula, it's not just the health system, it's also the education system. Because I know that I think I mentioned in the clubhouse a couple of times. One of there are jobs that well, first off, I differentiate between careers and jobs. Careers are things that you have a passion for and that you really enjoy. So, like
Right.
anything that I do in the arts and the entertainment world and media, those I consider careers because I really have a passion for them. I really enjoy them. Don't always get paid what I would like to do in their fields, but I enjoy them. So I consider those more like careers. But every once in a while, you have to get a job, something to pay the bills. And one of those that I have and have had for a number of years is with a company called Measurement Incorporated. It's one of the leading testing companies in the country in terms of like testing our kids the end of the year test. So I've been working with them for decades. So I know how they work. And a lot of that is rote learning. First off, they require you to have a college degree. I don't know why you need a college degree to grade papers that's off of a rubric. So I really don't understand why we even need the college degree, but they require a college degree. And then secondly, there is a lot of the testing in itself is trying to get people to spit back the facts that you want them to have, whether that's a mathematical equation, whether that's a historical fact, whether that's a whatever. But it's a lot of rote learning. So I think our education system is messed up because we're teaching kids
Oh,
rote learning. And even when we talk about technology, a lot of these jobs that our kids are getting trained for, to go to school for, to even go to college for, I don't know that they're going to exist in 20 years because of technology and things of that nature. Because I know that if you look at McDonald's, you look at some of the fast food restaurants, you can even look at some of the corporate jobs. They're being definitely outsourced out, and not to another country, but to like robots and technology. So, and don't
look at
get me
checkout, right? At CVS,
wrong. Right.
you got your self checkout.
Hmm.
Those used to be humans doing those jobs.
Exactly.
So, yeah, so absolutely, I agree with you. I've been talking about this forever. I do think that the education system does need to be revamped.
Hmm.
And just that relevance, I think, is crucial to keep kids engaged so that they're not just copying their neighbor for the answer. I mean, they were doing that when we were young too. I mean, it's still much of the model is still from that industrial revolution, and we're way beyond that, like the classes, the way real teams work is that, and I have seen this a lot where I am, and I do believe that in some ways where I am, when I did work in Colorado for a few years, I do feel like it's progressive here on many levels. There's so many resources for the children. And I do believe that, I've seen more, instead of the rows of, desks, now there's like collaborative
Right.
tables, things. So there's glimmers of this, in the system of some change, but I really do think it needs to be completely revamped.
No,
And
it
I
needs. Yeah, it definitely needs to be revamped. I agree. It needs to be revamped. There's no doubt about that. One of the other things that I really wish that we would have going on, and then I promise you, we've only got about another 5, 10 minutes of the show and everything, but I just wanted to know your thought about this other group of people that can really get on my nerves. They exist sometimes in Clubhouse, they exist in the real world. And that is folks that, we all have had our jobs, we've all had our causes that we are part of. I've seen it in activism, I've seen it in the arts, I've seen it in even planning and things of that nature. So definitely is something that I have a deep passion for. But there are a lot of folks out there, and I'm sure you've run across them, including when you're talking to the Marleys and some of the other folks that are basically the users of the world. So I was wondering how you even deal with those folks with your pleasant personalities, because there are a lot of folks that will basically not pay you the worth that you deserve because they have this kind of using mentality. So I was wondering, when you're in that corporate world or the education world or even in the entertainment world, how you manage with that positive energy. And I love your energy, by the way. How you manage to get past those folks that will do things that can tear down the energy. Because I've run across those a couple of times, and I was just wondering how you deal with them, or have you found a way to avoid them?
Yeah, I do kind of try to avoid them. I just kind of try to stay away from, you know, that sort of energy, um, because it should be somewhat reciprocal in some
Right.
way, whether there's like a fiscal compensation or whether there's something that, like I'm really charged up, like I was telling you earlier about this whole global issue going on right
Right.
now. So that is helping fuel me. And I'm just honored to have a space and platform. I've helped Kayente grow the room significantly, since I've been in there. But I'm not concerned about my own club at this point. Maybe later I'll go in and invite, all my followers to be a part of my club and do my own thing. But right now I'm really enjoying it. I enjoy his presence. I enjoy him redirecting and modding. Um and so my point of using that as an example is that, yeah, there's some compensations. People do give donations and it's wonderful, but mostly I'm charged by the spirit to get the truth out there, because I am pissed. I mean, I'm upset that our fourth branch is letting us down so bad by, being in bed with big pharma. Just, I'm going to put it very, very frankly. And
Yeah.
when you read Robert F. Kennedy's book, all the evidence is there, and backed by numerous things. So anyways, like I'm upset, and I feel, because with some of my colleagues and some of the people that I work with, I've kind of planted the seeds that I could, you
Mhm.
know with them, that are just going along with this, like nothing's wrong. And I did what I could in other areas as a union rep. I kind of just put a line out, like a fishing line out, to just, get a little taste of, just let people know their exemptions rights, like back in October. And several people reached out to me, and I know that they've been working on those. I do believe the deadline was just this past week. And
Wow.
so I was kind of helping them write last minute, exemptions. But when I got pushback from the union, I don't know if I finished this thought with you earlier,
Mhm.
that when we were talking about unions, I mean, I was really disappointed. And
Wow.
I've been very pleased with our union up until this point, where there was just like no question, like, oh, legal said the mandates are okay. And I was like, but there's this lawsuit, and I sent all these resources and
Mhm.
it was just like crickets. And when I realized that, I was like, gosh, this is a big problem. I'm going to try to do what I can for my 135 people to do what I can around campus to spread the truth. And sadly, people wake up when they can. I mean, today in Germany, a very high level physician killed himself.
Oh wow.
And literally, I can send you the article.
You do.
I could pull it up if you want. It's and this is today's news. So and it's heartbreaking to me because some of these people that are thinking this is such a good thing, especially for the children, I mean, because it's very
Mhm.
dangerous. These children are coming up with myocarditis. I mean, children should not be having heart attacks, period.
Right.
Shouldn't be having heart issues. And it's just, you know, a handful is way too many, and it's a thing. It's a problem. And
Yeah.
so this guy, the head of Kamenetz Clinic, Dr. Thomas Genges, committed suicide, saying he no longer wants to be part of the genocide happening.
Wow.
The head of Kamenetz Clinic.
Mm.
So I feel like as this truth unravels, I've been thinking, because I think doctors are wonderful people generally. I mean, in every field, right? We've been talking about this the whole time.
Right.
There's always going to be, it's, to me, I think of yin yang and apply
Mhm.
it to a lot of everything. There's always going to be people that abuse their power, that try to sneak around, that don't do their job that good, or like whatever, right? Like I
Right.
just try to spend my energy there because I have a very high work ethic. It's how I was raised, in a family business and raising my brothers and having to be really responsible. It's just in me. And so I just try to do my job as best as I can. And and I think that we're going to see more of that as this truth starts to unravel, that Kennedy and all of these other real life superheroes are laying the foundation for. I think we're going to start to see these doctors that are waking up to what's really happening, doing things like this. And it really, like, I cried when, someone sent me that article. I was so sad for that doctor, because that's what I'm talking about, this deception. They're trusting the World Health Organization, the CDC, the FDA, the NIH, the Bill and Linda Gates Foundation, but nobody knows there's a million. I mean, there's something, look up the Barrington Declaration,
Mhm.
860,000 deep have signed this against these doctors and scientists, okay? The Doctors and Scientists Declaration.org, same thing. Um, and so there's a million of these guys fighting this, and it's just, it really, but that's what drives me. And I feel like it's just my calling to let out the truth. And I'm not afraid, because I feel like I'm protected, by the Most High, because of all the other works I've been doing, is trying to set a higher vibration. And, but I'm very concerned about more things like this happening.
Yeah.
And
Look.
as people wake up, it's kind of, because people don't want to believe it, because it seems like a really weird thing to believe that there's this level of conspiracy, because we've all been blessed to live free up until this point. um and so so with that comes cognitive dissonance, comes denial, comes all the stages of grief to wake up to a real life, like, horror sci-fi sort of flick that seems to be happening right
Yeah.
before us.
What do you
So
say to those that took the shot or took the vaccination, and definitely may be in that category, but what do you say to those that took those shots and everything and are then concerned about where it stands or whether they should get the boosters or things of that nature? Because there have been, at least in the United States, quite a few folks that have gone ahead and, for whatever reasons, whether it's family coercion or whether it was choices that were made at whatever time in their life, there's quite a few folks that have already gone down the rabbit path, for lack of a better term.
if they're interested, they can come on Clubhouse and I will send them some antidotes that some doctors are putting around. One of them is Vladimir Zelenko, who is referenced in Robert Kennedy's book, Dr. Vladimir Zelenko, and then Dr. Judy Mikovits have put things out, and I'd be happy to pass those along. I do think that, I really, what I would also do is to encourage people to watch these things I've spoken of, the
Right.
Global COVID Summit, and watch the Texas COVID Summit. Um, and hear the stories and the firsthand accounts of how these people were really truly trying to save lives, these doctors, and scientists. I'm not a doctor, I'm not giving medical advice, but I am telling you, I'm listening to these experts. And what they're saying is that they've been trying to, actually practice medicine, which is what they're supposed to be doing. And then they're losing their jobs and licenses, and things are being stripped from them because now the media says ivermectin is not okay, or whatever it is that the CDC is putting out there, that is against their ethical practices. We've had numerous people roll through the spaces talking about, leaving their careers in the medical profession because of the ethics, because they weren't able to practice medicine. And these doctors are echoing the same thing. There shouldn't be just one protocol for any disease, right? Like that's why you have first, second, and third opinions,
Right.
um and if people are having the second, third, or fourth opinion, they're being fired and their licenses are being stripped from them. And it's really just disturbing, so I really encourage everyone to pick up that book, The Real Anthony Fauci. um and the subtitle is about Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the war on democracy and public health. And that kind of says a lot right there in the title. But the book is it's about 25-hour audio, 27 depending on what speed you put it on.
Gotcha.
For the narrator. I really encourage people to get that, to get an idea of what's going on. And I just have a lot of respect for the Kennedy family. And so we've yeah, I just encourage people to check that out and check out the other things. So that would be my response for anybody. And I actually say this frequently in the rooms a lot, is if anybody's in here and is afraid because they've had the vaccine, to just hit me up and I'll send this stuff along. They're not my publications, they're from these doctors,
That makes a
So
lot.
because I'm not a doctor, I don't know. I don't know, I don't know what to
That
do.
makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate
It's
you
hard
saying,
for people right now to trust going to their doctors, Mark,
yeah,
because of everything going on. And this, are you vaccinated? Are you vaccinated? You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
what, these vax cards. I mean, that's another, I mentioned all the violations in here since we've
mm,
spoken.
yeah,
What about HIPAA? What
mm,
about HIPAA that our ancestors fought so hard for? Our privacy. I heard a woman on stage once, and I say this a lot, that she said, when somebody asks me if I'm vaccinated, I'm like, do you have herpes? You know, I mean,
yeah,
case in point, like it's like that, it's a violation of private information. And I think that there's really valid concerns for people that are against this right now, and maybe have a clear idea of the agendas behind it. Ivermectin is a lot cheaper than the vaccine.
right. Speaking of agendas, what are your thoughts about, we're got a president in office right now who's got some very low popularity ratings. I really did not like that last guy that was in the office, and that's all I want to say. I just didn't like him. We won't say all the things that he's done in the corporate world and other places that were totally corrupt and everything. But it doesn't seem like we have much choice in the 2024 election. So, do you see any hope of anything coming out either from the independent wing or something that can get us out of this maze? Because, like I said, we seem to be in with the choice between worse and worse. I'm not even going to say bad and worse. It sounds like the choice in 2024 might be between worse and worse. Because if Biden decides to run again, we've got to deal with that. Kamala, while she is a sister that was a sorority lady and everything, she did not have that great of a history with the criminal justice system there in California. If she decides to run, and then I think our choices on the Republican side are Nikki Haley, Trump, and DeSantis. There might be others, but none of those choices really are resonating with me or making me feel really comfortable about the country.
Well, here's the thing that's interesting to me, because okay, so politics. So, yeah, I wasn't a fan of Trump either. I didn't like the way he spoke. And as a mother, even my kids knew, my kids, I hadn't even talked to them about it at all. And then they were like, he's evil. He wants to build a wall. Okay, I'm just going to be honest. There are babies down in cages still at the
Mm-hmm.
borders, because of some of Trump's rhetoric. And, I personally wasn't a fan. There were a couple of very few things that I liked. And I think some of my friends liked as well. But there was overall, I just that it was like a joke. Like I felt like I was in a clown show.
Right.
Right now, it's really sad because what's happening with this COVID thing, and everyone's blaming Biden, right?
Mhm.
They always do this political thing. It's not Biden. He has a health advisor. Who is his health advisor? Who was standing there on a stage last March 2020 with all those ventilators that ended up killing millions of people? That was Fauci. That's not, I don't think people really exactly realize the way politics work. So, gosh, I haven't even gotten that far to even think about it, Mark, but I just hope that it's somebody ethical and great. And I, I personally I think Bernie, Bernie has a great heart, um, and seems to care about the people. So I have no idea. I haven't even thought that far down, to be completely honest. But I
No.
do have to say that I think people should really understand everybody's blaming these politicians for going along this route. What would you do if the WHO, the CDC, the NIH, and the Bill and Linda Gates Foundation are telling you to do this? What would you do? You would do it because you
Right.
think it's right, best advice. You think that they were maybe collaborating with other scientists, actually doing the research behind this, not blocking any opposing research. That's what you would think, that there are bioethics happening, but that's not happening right now. And it's alarming and concerning to me. And that's why I keep mentioning it.
No, I
So
agree.
there's no reason that children should get this vaccine. None, zip, zilch, zero. At every summit that I've been live streaming um onto Clubhouse for hours, like the Florida COVID summit, that one is the global COVID summit was in Florida November 11th. That's a 6.5 hour summit, and our fans will sit there and will listen to it again and again and again, because it is like an educational sort of forum for us. And then we'll discuss it after, or take pauses if we need to. I mean, I have permission from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Skyhorse Publishing, for to run the audiobooks while we're also promoting it. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So that's been an honor. Um, and so with all of that being said, like, I just feel like it's my duty because nobody's running these. I mean, a Kennedy just put out a book 4 days ago, you know? You should get him on your show.
I would love to get him on my show. If you can help make that happen, if you can help make some of those other folks, like the folks connected to MC Hammer and Wu Tang, I would love to have them on. But anybody that you can help me
Oh,
get, I would definitely love to have any of that, because I love having these engaging conversations. That being said, one of the things I always do toward the end is there's two questions. One, as an activist, what advice would you give to other people that are thinking about getting into either activism or entertainment, other than maybe don't do it? That's just a joke, because think that most of us would encourage them to go ahead and do it and all of that. But what advice would you give to them in that regards? And then the other question, because the international broadcast media is aired at around 150 countries and all 50 states. So that being said, I appreciate Nick and Kim for coming up with this great platform and everything. Is um, when we kind of talked about some of the negative, but also the positive thing, and like I said, you have some of the most infectious personalities that I know and everything. But what words of positivity or encouragement would you give to the entire global community? Because it is a global community that we are part of. So those are the two questions. What advice would you give to people that want to step into that activism space and or the media space? And also, what kind of words of encouragement would you give?
um okay, so for the activism, well, I'll
Mm-hmm.
come back to that one. For the music and entertainment industry, I would say just don't sell out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, still always keep your values and hold your head high and just be who you are. Don't sell out to be famous or anything like that. Just stay a good, humble person. I mean, I work with some wonderful, conscious, humble people. Stay humble, you know? Don't let things ever get to your head, and keep your morals and values, because there are things in the industry, that may be tempting. And I just say, depending on whatever your mission is, uh, my mission was never to really be famous, like I just recently opened up my IG. It was like a private IG. Everything I was doing on Clubhouse up until about a month and a half ago was promoting these other platforms that I work with and trying to build them up, which I did. When I first got on, I still have the screenshots of that. There was, I mean, I've doubled the amount that was on IG through Clubhouse, and, getting more followers and things like this, because some of the Facebook ones were more built up when we were trying to build up the IG ones. And for me, it's easy because, I am led by the Most High in all of my works. And so, because that's the work I work in with reggae, it's easy, because the music that is always in all the music. Read a chapter daily, a lot of these artists like talk about this, and a lot of these uncles that I've, inherited along the journey remind me of that, like, every day. So it's, I think that just not to sell out, and don't sell your soul for fame would be my advice. Um, and then, regarding activism, I was going to pull up this quote that I think is really powerful. And this is what the advice that I would give to people. And same way, if you're really passionate about something and you feel like standing up for it, be brave, be bold. Like we do for now, we have freedom of speech. We're supposed to
Okay.
stand up for it. Um, I actually, do admire, some of these people that have had their accounts taken, because they were trying to speak up and didn't realize there's scrubbers on Facebook and IG and YouTube that are basically pulling things down that are against this plan that's happening right now to get everyone jabbed on earth. And so just follow your heart. That would be my suggestion to anybody that's looking to be an activist or wanting to figure out. Just start, doing things. Get active. Do whatever it is that you want to be an activist in, and just be strong, and know that usually in any front, whether it's good or bad, you're not alone. There, you'll find other people to connect with. And I say, as long as you're not hurting other people, do it, go for it. And there's also this quote: throughout history, it has been the inaction of those who could have acted, the indifference of those who should have known better, the silence of the voice of justice when it mattered most, that has made it possible for evil to triumph. And that is by Emperor Haile Selassie.
Hmm. Powerful quote. Very
Right?
powerful quote. How can folks reach you on social media? And like I said, what advice would you give to just general people around the world in terms of that positivity message as well? But definitely, how can folks reach you on social media?
Well, under my name, Tula McCarley. It's, the same on Facebook and IG. I haven't really built up my other platforms yet. Like, I'm not really public on Snapchat. I don't think that. The filters are fun sometimes on that
Yes.
one. And my kids and I do goofy things on that. But I haven't really built up my TikTok. So really I'm just on Facebook and Instagram. You can get a hold of me there. Um, and what else for positivity?
Yeah. And on Clubhouse, you're too legit. So they need to know that on Clubhouse, it's too legit.
Oh, and on Clubhouse, it's too legit.
Right.
MC, that's for the last name McCarley.
Right.
And I'm not an MC, guys. So, yeah, but for staying positive, was that the next thing you asked me
Yes.
about?
Yes, please.
Um, I think that, like we've been saying throughout this interview, that it's a choice. You have a choice in your life if you're going to feed the negative vibrate. We all feel negative, right, Mark?
Yep.
I get jealous sometimes. Do I feed it? No. I just honor it and let it flow through my body, let it go away. So don't feed the bad vibes. Feed the good vibes, like the Rastas stay upright. And just if you do feel bad feelings, try to let it flow through. Go exercise, go like get some endorphins going in your brain. Um, and try to, always rise above. That would be my advice to people.
I appreciate that advice, and I think it's great advice. I know sometimes if I'm in a bad mood or in one of those negative spaces, and I agree we all get in those. And sometimes all I need to do is hear the dog that's above me, because one of my neighbors has a pet dog, Astro, and then on the other side is Louie, and then there are cats and other critters and animals around this apartment complex. So sometimes just seeing them or the plants can add some joy to your life as
Yes.
well.
Yes, if you have a garden, get in the dirt. Oh
Right.
my goodness, that's so therapeutic. I grew up around farmers and greenhouse and stuff like that. So
Yeah, gardens are great. A friend of mine who actually lives here but is originally from Brazil. She's got a big garden that for the second year in a row had a big sunflowers plant because it was
oh,
literally she's on the first floor and the sunflowers plant was going up to the second floor. So for the second year, she's grown a very successful sunflower plant and everything along those lines. Young lady, I think she just turned 30 last year, either 30 or 31. But yeah, definitely is very much involved in that whole garden space because her and it's actually interesting as the conclusion and remark and everything. You were mentioning that old advisor that you had and everything. There's another gentleman that's nearby who's a little bit older than me, so he's probably in his maybe late 70s, early 80s. I'm about to hit 60 next year, so he's probably in his 70s or 80s. But they have actually bonded over gardening because, like I said, he's got a little small garden and she's got a much bigger garden, but they've bonded over communicating around gardening and stuff like that. So they have become friends over 2 years. So they have kind of that mentor kind of relationship that you were talking about that you had with your advisor, because I'm sure they're talking about life and just life lessons learned and things of that nature. So big shout out to both Michelle and Andrew who do that on a regular basis. And sometimes I will see them out and about and shout at either one or the other. As a matter of fact, Michelle dropped off some homegrown tomatoes for me a couple of days ago, and I enjoyed them thoroughly. So, like I said, a little salt, which I probably didn't need because salt is not good for you. But sometimes you have to put that salt on those tomatoes or on those watermelons as well, or maybe even on the cucumbers also. But Tula,
hey,
I
I'm gonna
thoroughly
shout out
enjoyed
my
this
dad.
conversation. Huh?
I'm gonna shout out my dad because I literally grew up in a flower shop and greenhouse. And honestly, Mark,
Mhm.
this place where I live, I moved in last January and I was only supposed to be here for 6 months. And then here I am almost 2 years. And it's the first place in 20 years where I didn't have a garden. And it's very, it was COVID and everything. You better believe me and the kids were out everywhere running around, trying to, I miss a yard, is what I'm trying to say. But my dad's one of my best friends, and we spent a lot of time in the greenhouse having amazing conversations that spent my time. So shout out to you, Dad.
Great shout out to your dad and everything. Sounds like he is an amazing person. Now, I know I love my dad as well. He's still bicycling and swimming and still doing his artwork. So if folks are not familiar with bambooturtle.com, if I'm wrong and it's not a .com, it's a .org, but I'm pretty sure it is .com, but you can see all of his amazing work that includes photography, um, found art. He actually had this great for lack of a better term, it would be almost considered like a performance piece because he literally had like the symbols like you get at a fire station, and within the symbol was basically an attack of not an attack, but the way that we sometimes say that we want to pray for people and things of that nature, but we only say it in the sense of like a it being a word of condolence or something like that, but there's no action behind it. So that's what kind of the artwork was about because it was kind of like the little fire alarm. And basically, he was like saying that those prayers are kind of empty promises if you don't do something behind the prayers, is kind of what the
Right.
message of the piece was that you can say that you're going to, pray for the victims of the, I think he did it around the time of the hurricanes down there in New Orleans. So, but you can say that you're going to pray for them or you're going to pray for the victims of the tragedies in like um, the Middle East or the tragedies around the world. But if we're not doing something behind it, it's just empty kind of promises as kind of the message that I think was the gist of what his piece was. But if you go there to his website, you can find out some of that great work that he does on a regular basis. Because I get it honestly from both my dad and my mom, and they're both living. I will see But Dad's not that big on Thanksgiving, so I may
You
see
know,
him after Thanksgiving, but I will see Mom on Thanksgiving on Thursday.
one more thing, and then I'll just stop. But
Yes.
I art and music and literature has always been so crucial for me in my life and throughout history
Hmm.
for the masses. When you
Yes.
think of dire times, I mean, the theater, whatever it was, the native ceremonies, these things are really important. I think it's very undervalued in our current society at large. I mean, it is valued, but it's not valued. I have a
Yeah.
lot of many artist friends that I grew up with that are, that's what they do. They're professional artists in one way or form. And I I think that it should be a career that's not so difficult to be an artist in this current society that we live in.
I agree. And we actually also need to find ways to actually not just honor the artists, but also make sure that the artists get paid what the artists are worth because they do bring so much to society. And a lot of times we cheapen their art by not giving them the kind of dues that they need in terms of the pay and the things of that nature. And while we may see the high end artists getting some great money, and definitely there are some that are getting some tremendous checks, I do know a lot of struggling artists, and sometimes they are struggling because some of the festivals and some of the clubs are wanting to pay them pennies and all of that, but they want to pay their plumbers and some of their other people that they want to get services from a whole lot of money, but they don't want to honor the artists and pay them what they are worth. So that's
Right.
one of the things that I think we have to do is we need to pay the artists what they are worth.
Right.
Tula,
Absolutely.
I'm gonna have to bring you back on another show because I love your
That's
energy.
right.
And anytime that you can come back, I would definitely love to have you back. I love having guests come back on return trips, but I'm gonna bring that little robot thing on that they used to bring me on and off on this show. But I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you back in the very near future. You are definitely
Thank
a
you,
fun
Mark.
person, and I definitely love your energy. I know that we have this whole friendship thing going and everything, but I definitely love your energy. Told you that several times in the clubhouse space, but I'll also share it here on international broadcast media as well. So
Thank
anytime
you.
that you want to come back, just holler. Either text me or if there's anything going on, even issue wise, that either you or Kayante or any of the other folks on Success Airlines want another platform, just consider this another home and know that you can come here and rock with me anytime that you feel like it, as can any of our fellow associates.
Thank you so, so much. Appreciate you.
No
Blessing.
problem. Thank
And
you.
so